So I got an email from somebody asking me a few questions about how my 1% buyer agency model works, and I thought it would be worth answering a couple of these questions on video. So the email says, I'm contacting you because of Just One AZ's advertised 1% buyer representation model. Could you please confirm in writing the maximum total compensation your brokerage would receive, the amount I could owe if the seller offers no buyer agent compensation, and how compensation offered by the seller above 1% would be handled? So I want to start by going over a couple of the documents that we use in every transaction in order to accomplish this. The first one that I want to start with is this one here, which is called the Buyer Broker Exclusive Employment Agreement, which outlines the terms of our contract for buyer representation. As you can see here, it's got a start and end date, states the geographical area in which we are going to be working, and most importantly states the amount that I'm going to be paid. Now, one of the questions that he asked is what happens if the offer of compensation is greater than the amount that we're actually charging, and that is outlined right here on this document, and I've highlighted it here. And it says, if the seller or seller's broker offer of compensation is greater than the broker compensation, the broker shall be paid the broker compensation and the balance shall be credited to the buyer. So effectively what that means is if the amount of compensation that the seller is paying us is greater than the amount on this document, then we basically take it in to our brokerage and then credit it back out to the client, in this case the buyer. So it's pretty simple. Since there's not really an offer of compensation on most properties, especially those that are listed on the MLS anymore, we actually accomplish how much the seller is paying us through a separate document that is now called the Seller Compensation Addendum. So I've got another sample addendum here that I have with another client where we did exactly this. We have a compensation amount here, which is 3% that we've asked the seller to pay for us. And it says right here in this highlighted section, this may be credited to buyer in whole or in part. And that's exactly what we did. Since we charged the buyer 1%, we have 3% on this seller compensation addendum here. And there was a 2% credit that goes back to the buyer at the close of escrow. So what can that be used for? In most finance transactions, we take that money and we give it over to the lender and we get a lower interest rate on the mortgage, or it could be used to cover closing costs. For this particular person that was asking this question, they said, what would happen in a cash transaction? Well, in a cash transaction, what would happen is it just gets credited back to the buyer and it lowers the amount of money that they have to come into the contract with, which is very simple. So if we have a $500,000 house and we're giving a 2% credit back to the buyer, then in a finance transaction, we would take that money and probably get a lower interest rate with it. In a cash transaction, they would just have to come in with $10,000 less than they would have otherwise. So cash transactions are very simple. We basically just give it straight back to the buyer. Finance transactions are a little bit trickier because we have to spend the money on an actual closing costs, but it's usually not a problem to find something that we can spend it on. And typically we do so by lowering the fixed interest rate. In other sections or in other situations, we might just get a temporary buy down, like a 2-1 buy down or something like that. But in all situations, if we're charging the seller more than we're charging the buyer, we're crediting the difference back to the client. And if you want to learn more about how our process works and saves you money in all transactions, then just visit www.just1az.com.